Miss an afternoon with Mitch.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 7 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. If you've ever spent any time in a hospital as a patient or as the family member of a patient, you might have looked at the doctors and you might have said, wow, they are amazing. Doctors and nurses are amazing. And you know what? They are. What happened for me was I felt so inadequate because I do radio. So I think, oh my gosh, they give so much to the world, and yet I do a radio show. It doesn't give as much, you know. And then after they had a lull, when things weren't so hectic, I heard them talking about things in the entertainment field, and I thought, wait a minute. So we are kind of their doctors, and so they have a lot of stress on them. So that's why when we get up, you know, and if we can be a clown or I don't know, whatever we do in entertainment, it hopefully makes a difference. Our next guest has written a book. He's a doctor, and he was a little bit disenfranchised by the whole medical profession, and he was actually suicidal. And one of his colleagues actually went through with the suicide. Dr. Adam B. Hill is a pediatric oncologist, I never know how to say this word, see what I mean, Robin? I can't even say the word. Palliative care physician. He was in recovery for alcoholism, depression, and burnout. His book is called Long Walk Out of the Woods. It is his story, and it is a story of hope. Dr. Hill, I know we've had some phone issues, but thank you for being there. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Where are you now? Where are you calling from?
In Indianapolis, Indiana, at Riley Hospital for Children, where I work.
Oh my gosh! So, what point in your life does this story take place? How far back?
You know, the truth is, even early in my youth, I struggled a bit with anxiety and just had this internal emotional turmoil of angst. And for years, I overachieved. I was a perfectionist, high academic, athletic achiever to kind of mask that insecurity. And so it kind of started early on, even kind of elementary school age. The true part of my depression story really didn't start until medical school and worsened as my training went on, ultimately culminating in what I initially started to do, self-medicate and cope with alcohol for depression, and then it worsened and worsened to the point that I really had this active suicidal plan.
Can you be your own psychologist and determine what it all stems from? Did you have troubling things that happened early in your life, or do you not know?
Yeah, I guess in truth, I probably don't need to be my own. I've had plenty over the course of my life in a good way. Okay. But, you know, I had a really normal upbringing, a really loving family, a really supportive community, and I'm really blessed with that. I think a lot of it was, you know, going into a high-achieving field and sort of feeling like an imposter and feeling inadequate at times, and then just not having the self-awareness to take care of myself and to prioritize myself in a system that often doesn't reward that, and, you know, asks people to give more and more and push themselves and sleep deprive and just sort of sacrifice a lot of your personal identity to a profession. And so I didn't have healthy ways of setting boundaries and really taking care of myself throughout that process, and that was part of the difficulty.
It seemed that you had a new approach to getting over your addictions, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. And up to that point, it seemed that's the way people were being treated.
Yeah, I think recovery is very individualistic, and I found recovery with the help of my family, with my wife, my parents, my sister, close friends, and for me, got connected into a recovery community, and I was in AA recovery, and also needed to be concurrently treated for mental health, and on antidepressants and in a DBT-based psychotherapy program, which was helpful. I think a lot of the additional work, though, came with, really sort of setting limits and boundaries and learning who I was, and developing coping skills that allowed me to do difficult work on a daily basis, and now raise toddlers and, be in a healthy, happy marriage, but have coping skills to do so. So it's, I think it has to be a very specific individual approach. And so far I've found what I needed.
Whenever we hear about people communicating with one another, sometimes we'll say, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall to hear that conversation. In your case, I wish I could be a fly metaphorically in your mind. I wish I could have heard your thoughts when you were being told by physicians what you need to do, because intellectually you already knew what to do. So why is it that somebody who knew what to do needed another physician to tell him that self-medicating alcohol is not a medicine, or whatever they might have told you?
Well, I think the truth is that somebody who's struggling in active depression and active addiction, there are so many veils of denial and lack of insight into the depths of your own struggles. And so, speaking on the intellectual level and knowing sort of the pharmacology and the pathways and the science behind these conditions is one thing. Living it and having an emotional discordance and connecting the dots is another. And so for anybody, I think, struggling in active mental health or addiction conditions, you have to have an external lens. You have to have other people to bring you out of that fog or that haze and help you see the possibility of recovery, because I sure didn't see it myself.
How were you able to regain the trust, not just of your family, but of your patients and colleagues?
Well, so, I think the long-winded answer in a very brief statement is just by doing the next right thing and one step at a time. I never actually had any professional ramifications like in my daily life. I was still a very successful physician, and so I think, I still talk to families I took care of 10 years ago when I was struggling who never knew, the depths of my internal turmoil. And so I don't know that I had to do a lot of work at recovering that respect, but with family, with friends, with the institutions of medicine that tend to stigmatize mental health and addiction, it has taken a long time, but I tend to approach it just as controlling the things that I can control and doing the next right thing, and being privileged and blessed for the opportunities and the doors that are open in front of me.
One of the lines in one of the reviews on Amazon says, "In this book, Dr. Hill shows us that life and love matter." Can you explain why that reviewer is taking that from the book?
Well, I think that I try to write this story not as a doctor who's been in recovery, but as a human being affected by conditions that a lot of us struggle with. And so I write in a way that's a human story that I think a lot of people can connect to, and who've either been personally affected or had family or friends or loved ones that have been affected. And so when we're talking about 20% of the overall population with mental health conditions and 10 million Americans with concurrent mental health and addiction stories, I think this is a very common story. And so in the end, I think that the power of the stories we tell and the lives we live are important. And I think love and being unconditionally loved and supported is a huge part of recovery. And so I think that person hopefully saw that and saw that, I'm not the hero of this story. It's my wife, it's my children, my parents, my sister, and my friends who stood by me and said, we're in your corner no matter what.
And you also say that within life, a person still has to remain well-rounded. You just, not just in your work, but in relaxation, like you root for the Bulldogs.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to live a well-balanced life, and some of them are tangible skills that I've developed over time, or things that are therapeutic treatment programs like therapy. But I have been on this quest for gratitude and appreciation, and finding things that are meaningful for me and what gives me joy and where's my impact, where can I make a difference. And some of it is as trivial as college basketball, like Butler basketball, but it means a lot to me to work to balance, and how do I separate my identities from being a professional who loves his career, but also being a husband, a father, a brother, a son, and keeping those identities sacred and individually in their own silos.
Did you discover any hacks? That's a kind of a newer word in this context. The kids will show, here's a hack on how to work this thing or that thing. But any like shortcuts or any tips, any tricks? Like for me, I'll just give you an example to help you understand what I'm asking. If I get bummed out by something, I can cheer myself up by looking at dog videos. It's just because they're funny. It makes me, and I know that's simplifying something. But do you have any hacks of your own that if you're starting to slip into depression, for example, you can kind of snap out of it by doing whatever?
I appreciate the dog video reference. I'm a dog lover myself. I have three dogs at home, and I would pet therapy, and having them has been part of my recovery program. I don't know that there's any definitive shortcut or hack to recovery from mental health or addiction. I think that, but the thing that I would say is, reach out your hand and reach out to somebody else as the shortcut is, try to include somebody who's trusted in your own internal circle that you can help you get connected and to help you get the resources or services, or even just the support that you need. There is a lot of hard work that goes into recovery, and that's for sure. And I'm almost 6 years sober next month, and I still take it a day at a time and appreciate the day for what it is.
It's still relatively new for you. 6 years is not that long, so well, good for you. So in writing the book, you're getting really good reviews, so people are connecting. One guy or one reviewer even said they finished the book in 3 hours. You're obviously hitting a button that needs to be hit. 5-star reviews across the board. I mean, that's almost unheard of. Are you getting feedback from your readers? Are you finding from people that your story is their story?
Yeah, it's been really powerful and really heartwarming to see the feedback and really from all walks of life. This isn't a book for medical professionals. It's a book for anyone, and that's kind of the source of these reviews have come from. So I think I wrote this book in the hopes that it would reach people that needed to hear a message of recovery and hope, and that it would break down some of the walls of silos of isolation so that people wouldn't feel alone. And I hope it's doing that, because really that's why I wrote it. And after specifically losing 6 colleagues to suicide in my career, and
wow.
And seeing people struggle and suffer in silence all the time, and afraid of stereotypes and stigma, afraid of being labeled weak or flawed or broken. I wrote this so that they wouldn't feel alone or different, and that's really for everybody.
Well, your writing does have a sense of humor to it. I know suicide is not funny at all, but you did remark that you couldn't even get a gun to do it right, so you just sort of regressed into your childhood, and then you thought about one of your favorite books, My Side of the Mountain. That was sort of helping you through this.
Yeah, I thought that, I try to paint some ironic juxtaposition into different aspects of the writing, of reflecting back into the things I learned or knew in my youth and how they played against, trying to emotionally mature and grow. from my adolescence into an adult, even into my 30s. And so, I think that there's a little bit of whimsy or play with the words and the concepts of that, because I was learning to grow up and mature, even at 32 when I started, or 31 when I started to find recovery. And so I do sort of, I think, try to do some of that in the writing as well.
Doctor, when we look back on medicine like 100 years ago and we see how they handled, tumors or even blood transfusions, I mean, some of the things that we take for granted nowadays, we say, thank God we live now. And I'm wondering if our confidence in ourselves as providers and caregivers, is that maybe part of the reason why you went through that disillusionment period? Because we're still not perfect. I mean, nothing is perfect, but we try as hard as we can. The doctors 100 years ago tried as hard as they could. So is that part of the problem, is thinking that everything should be fixable? And like I read somewhere once that doctors try to keep people alive, and when they don't, they feel like they failed. And maybe that's just part of what we have to understand is part of life, is death.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful point, and kind of two aspects of that for me, and that I write about in this book, or one is that cultural expectation of how medicine has evolved into being able to fix all the tangible pieces of a human being indefinitely, and that life can be perpetuated and extended, and that mortality and talking about it is the enemy. And we've built that up in Western medicine, that hospitals are a place to come to become well in a sick care system, and it puts an immense amount of pressure on the individuals delivering what has now become a product of modern business in medicine. And so it is an immense pressure that we wear, and that if perfection isn't achieved or an unexpected outcome happens, litigious processes ensue, or there's this guilt and shame attached to an imperfect outcome. So I think that's one piece of it for sure. To your point, too, of how we practice now versus 100 years ago, I think there's been this externalization of the practice of medicine to technologic proficiency and mechanisms, procedures, and interventions, and all these things that we rely upon as how medicine operates efficiently, as opposed to the humanism and face-to-face interaction of the doc coming to a bedside at the home of a sick child and really connecting with people on a human-to-human level that we miss a lot. And as somebody who deeply cares about the healing power of human connection, I think that can be a struggle in modern medicine as well.
And so your past of having to deal with this, and now you're working with families and children, are you able to recognize some addiction factors in a child? Because we hear about that all the time. They're getting addicted to alcohol when they're 8 years old.
Yeah, I think that somebody who has lived experience now, I've been privileged and blessed to be able to help, in particular, teenagers more than not navigate their own chemical coping with their illness and or active addiction, substance use disorders. And so it has been a skill set I've been able to develop as somebody who's lived it, who can get it and understand and empathize, and hopefully get people connected to what they need. And it's much more prevalent than we talk about and than we acknowledge, and a national epidemic of ongoing, especially opioid conditions. It is an important thing to realize that even very early on in youth, individuals can struggle with addiction.
Dr. Adam B. Hill is our guest. His book is called Long Walk Out of the Woods, and I want to use the title in order to ask you a question. Were you aware, or how were you aware maybe, when you actually were finally out of the woods?
This is a beautiful question. I like to think that I'm still on this walk, and part of my recovery will continue to be this walk and learning to carve the path continuously. As somebody who lives with addiction and lives in it, in the realization of it every day, I continue to have to work to put distance in between where I was and where I want to go. But I see it as a lifelong walk.
It seems that you are going to be helping a lot of people, sir. You are a huge, huge mentor for people that are in denial. You're giving them a reason to get out of that denial and to seek help and to admit they have a problem.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very, very kind of you. I'd like to think that at least I'm adding my voice to a larger movement to normalize conversations about mental health and addiction. And I took an oath as a physician to do no harm and to do my best to help other people who are struggling and suffering. And so I see this no different than walking into the bedside and giving antibiotics to somebody. It's, to me, a calling in the same.
This book has been out less than a month, and it's already received 5-star reviews from 31 different people, all of them 5 stars. There's nothing less than 5 stars. There is actually a copy of the book here in the studio. I'd like to give it away to one listener. So if you call in 622-9622, you have to let it ring for a long time because we got to wait till we're done speaking to Dr. Hill. But I'll take one caller at random and give you the book. I did find the book on Amazon. Doc, do you have a website you'd like to tell us about?
I do. You can also go to adambhillmd.com and have some information and have a blog and some pictures and things there. The book is also available online anywhere books are sold. Your Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, all of those outlets as well.
Is the book doing what you imagined it would do when you first started writing the book?
Expectations are always a killer of people in recovery. So I try to set my expectations that it was therapeutic to write this, and that I hope that it reaches people that need to hear it. And if it does that, it reaches 5 people or 500 or who knows how many, then it was worth it. And so I try to keep the lens focused that way.
Dr. Adam B. Hill, thank you so much for being on the air with us today. Keep your chin up, keep playing with those dogs, and take a long walk somewhere. Now, don't go back into the woods, though. Stay out of the woods. Thank you, Doctor.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time and the opportunity.
You're welcome. We'll be right back.
The joys of flying from a major hub.
Come on, guys, we gotta go.
Wait, honey, but our flight doesn't leave for 5 hours.
I know, but traffic could be